Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. This is Misha. He wants to be in the video too, I guess. Today we're going to look at the Pauper metagame for the last week. We're looking at what decks are popular, what percentage of every deck that is being played right now, the percentage of top 8 decks of the two big tournaments that happened on Moto this past weekend. And we're going to be looking at some of those deck lists, and we'll be picking out like one of the deck lists that I think is pretty cool that might not be at the top. Can you lay down? This is... There we go. Okay, let's get going. This is the Pauper metagame as of right now. I'm sorry for the mistype, the blue-black tempoi. My bad. So this is all of the leagues, all of the prelims, the challenges, and the qualifiers that were published as far as Magic Online deck lists go. This is of League 5.0s, Prelim 4.0s, and top 32s of challenges and qualifiers. Of those decks, Red White Synth was 23.8% of the decks. Caw Gate, which is the one of my primary deck, is 16.3%, and Blue Black Tempo, also called Blue Black Control, I think is a tempo deck, is 13.8%. So let's look at some of those lists. At the very top, Red White Synth is named after Experimental Synthesizer. It's meant to get value out of all of these artifacts. It's a pretty aggressive deck with cards like Seeker of the Way, Glint Hawk, Galvanic Blast, and it's meant to control the board and just get value off of artifacts. So while it's not the fastest deck in the format, it's a pretty quick deck, it's very resilient, and has a strong late game for being a more aggressive deck. So it makes sense why this is the most popular deck. The second most popular deck, Caw Gate, I can speak a little bit more on because this is my primary deck in Pauper. So it plays value cards. It is basically a blue-white control deck, but what it's centered around is a recurring lifelink creature in Sacred Cat, a flyer in Glint Hawk, and basically unblockable and unkillable in Pauper because there's not a lot of multicolor cards in Guardian of the Guild pack. And then most of your lands are gates. It's centered around this card, Basilisk Gate, which basically gives +X/+X equal to the number of gates you control to a creature. So you do blue-white control stuff. You play one of these creatures, and then once you stabilize, you start pumping it up with Basilisk Gate and jamming in. It's a pretty fun deck to play. It's very good. And then the third most popular deck is the Grixis Artifacts deck, also known as Affinity. Some people call this is basically the Affinity deck in Pauper. It plays a bunch of artifact synergies. It kind of plays as a control deck, drawing a ton of cards with Thoughtcast, 1-mana counter spells with Metallic Rebuke, big burn spells with Galvanic Blast. Just gets those. It kind of does what Red White Synthesizer does, in that it gets a ton of value off of artifacts, but instead of being aggressive with that value, it is controlling with that value. So that's the overall metagame. But let's look at the top 8 metagame. There are 2 big tournaments this past weekend. One was a qualifier, which you had to buy into with qualifier points, and then one was a challenge. Of those 2 tournaments, only 4 types of decks made top 8. It's our good friends. Caw Gate was 31.3% of the top 8s. Grixis Artifacts and Red White Synth were both 25% of the top 8. And a new homie on the scene, I guess, which actually, if you look at that previous graph, it was the 4th most popular deck, is Blue Black Tempo. So let's look at the Blue Black Tempo deck. Blue Black Tempo is exactly what it sounds like. You know, it plays a bunch of cheap draw spells, a bunch of cheap kill spells, and sometimes free kill spells like Snuff Out. Plays cards to hit more of those cards that help you tempo the person out, and then plays these 1-mana threats in Gurmag Angler and Tolarian Terror and just kills their opponent. So, I mean, these are both the 4 most popular decks and the only decks that made top 8s, so it would make sense to play one of these decks. These are the decided best decks in the format in Pauper, and really, like, there's a large gap between number 4 and number 5. But what I always like to do in these metagames is, as I look through these lists, there's always 1 or 2 lists that really pop out and stand out to me. And this list is White Auras. So my secondary list is Green-White Boggles, which I really, really enjoy playing, especially when I don't want to think too hard. But White Auras is a really interesting take on it. So rather than trying to remain hexproof, what White Auras does is basically more of an all-in strategy, even more than Green-White Boggles. Green-White Boggles, once you suit up a guy, really the only things that deal with it are like board wipes, which are essentially non-existent in Pioneer, and sacrifice effects. While the White Auras deck does die to removal, what you do is you play the Umbras, right? Hyena Umbra would protect from that. And you're more all in. You're suiting up creatures that, yes, can be removed, but also suiting up creatures that do other things, right? The Laguna Band Trailblazer can't really be burned down because it's an 0/4, but it has heroic, right? It gets +1/+1 when you suit it up. Vault Scourge is a lifelinker with evasion. Ginger Brute is able to get haste, so you can do it out of nowhere. Sacred Cat is lifelink and has recursion. So it's, I think, a way more all-in version of this Auras deck. And I think it was just so cool, especially since, there were 6 of these decks total that 5-0'd a League this past week. So it's definitely real in some effect. And I'm really excited to try it out on my own. Well, there's the Pioneer metagame. If you liked this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.